Awesome. So thank you everyone for showing up, and I'm really excited about our discussion today. My name is Navin Goyal. I'm co-founder and CEO of Loud Capital. The purpose of the Venture for People series is to take venture capital, education, investment, entrepreneurship, put it all into one, and to problem solve, meet great entrepreneurs doing big things, but then also to perhaps put some ideas and thoughts out there about how we can help solve problems that some folks are already doing. Can never get enough great minds, and I'm fortunate enough to get a great group today. So I have Danielle and Melissa from Haven Collective and Sasha Saberi from LoudX Venture Studio. So I'll just jump right in. And I know we're talking about community and everything around community. And I think Melissa and Danielle are the epitome of entrepreneurship folks who are hustling and doing really, really big things through co-working and community that we're going to be talking about today. So with that, I say, Melissa and Danielle, if one of you want to just go through and start giving your background and why you're here, and we'll go from there.
Danielle, I'm going to throw it to you.
This is what we always do. Who's up first, right? So, Danielle Lim, co-creator of Haven Collective. Haven was founded out of a conversation with Mel and I don't know, 5 years ago now, 4 years ago now. I can't do math. 2017, sometime in 2017. We've known each other for over a decade, and we were best friends in grad school and met at Ohio State and just, hit it off. And we've been in each other's lives and also heard a lot of our dreams and goals for our lives and our futures over the years. And one of them, from Mel's perspective, which she'll have to dive into some more, is that I always knew she wanted to be her own boss and be an entrepreneur. But during all those years together, I was a work from home professional, and I did that for 12 years. And complaining to my best friend one night over dinner, I told her that I was disappointed in what was around and how, I fell in love with this idea of co-working and the community aspect of it that all of them seemed to advertise. But then when I would go in and try them out, it was just a space. There really wasn't a lot of community there. It was all left up to the individual to struggle and figure it out as they went along. And on top of that, I was newly married and was thinking about, how am I going to work from home if we have kids and expand our families? And this complaining turned into, in one night, mind you, it turned into Haven Collective. And 11 months later, we were opening our doors to our first location, and we've put all of our energy into really supporting and building the community aspect of co-working. We didn't want it to just be our pitch to people. We wanted it to actually feel real. And when you walk in our spaces, they're warm and inviting, and you feel the difference from your first moment in the door. And, we're still working on it. We've got number 2 open downtown a couple years later, and hoping to continue expanding for the Columbus community. Mel, what did I miss? Tell me.
Well, I want to
really pretty much, yeah, that's great.
And I want to say one thing that I really have to mention is that your complaining turned into a business all in one night. And I just like to share those things, because how many people are complaining at this moment about something, right? And if you could turn that into a problem solving exercise, think about the productivity and the fulfillment that people would have and society would have, right? Mm-hmm. So anyways, that's awesome that you did that it happened so quickly, but that's literally what it takes. Okay, I complained about something because this is not working. What can I do to help myself? And now you're helping so many other people, but that's awesome. Sorry, Melissa, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, not at all. No, that's a wonderful point. That's
right
an
complaint
awesome
at the right time, right, Mel?
Yeah, for sure. I think that there are $1 million ideas, complained into the atmosphere every single day. It's just taking the solution a solution approach to it, right? So additionally, with Danielle having this isolation at home and not really feeling the connection she needed in her day, I was struggling wanting to leave my job, but loving my coworkers so much that they kept me there. That was my family. Those are the people I loved seeing every day. I just could not imagine leaving that support system. And when I really got to thinking about how I could create that on my own and it didn't have to be tied to a corporate job, it was everything I needed to finally pull the trigger and go out on my own, knowing that I wasn't going to be alone because I was going to create something where I had other excited people around me doing their thing. And it was kind of unstoppable once the light bulb went off.
Hell yeah. I love Unstoppable. I get
I mean,
excited.
it really was 11 months from the night we drank too much sake and came up with that idea to our opening day.
And this was in 2017. We're not talking about something that people can't relate to on this call or who will be watching this conversation. And again, I bring this up because there are plenty of conversations that I have on a daily basis that say, gosh, I wish I would have thought of that. There's this problem, but I'm sure someone's working on it, or I'm late in my life and I can't do this. Like, F that, you just made it happen, and 11 months later, and here we're talking right now, and you're already affecting the community. I'm obviously a big fan. So anyways, that it's great. These are simple things I really like to highlight, because this is whatever helps people get over their own obstacles, or perhaps throw some inspiration in a very practical manner to move forward. I really like to push that.
We're making it sound very simple, but it was really just starting somewhere. It was really just like, it wasn't that simple. But, the fact that we were willing to just start somewhere and start asking questions and doing some market research and validating this idea and not letting it just sit. Every day, every week, we had action items that were starting to add up. And I think that's really what made it feel so simple, because we were just so committed to doing something every day, and it all just added up.
One perspective maybe is there's a lot of simple steps that can be taken in a complex scenario. So there's not trying to undervalue what entrepreneurs go through, and let's say what your story is. However, it's really important to humanize this and make sure everyone out there knows that you two, even though I consider you rock stars, you're not superstars. You're not superhuman. You're not right. And that's where I think it's that middle of it's hard as heck to be an entrepreneur and doing what you've already gone through and will go through, but you're still human, and taking simple steps to move forward can get you in this crazy, awesome, inspiring entrepreneurial journey.
Well said.
So I'm not going to ignore another rock star in the room, Sashas, CEO of LoudX, also a friend, and probably has a lot of thoughts as well. But maybe, Sasha, you can chime in, give some of your background, and just add to the excitement of what everyone's doing here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. I don't know how I can follow these two rock stars. I've actually had the privilege of working with all three of you, in many different projects, and just kind of been fortunate to see what you've accomplished in this short amount of time. And thinking about my experience as well, there was a lot that I dealt with regarding getting started, and should I get started? Should I do this? It was really like 5 years ago, I think, at this point. I was working in corporate. We were doing a lot of innovation work. We were working with a lot of new technologies, big companies, and doing a lot of, whether it was venture building or helping build solutions and all that good stuff. There was a time in my life where I was spending a lot more time out west with the startups, the accelerators, and I started to feel a difference between the corporate world and the startup world, or the venture ecosystem. And that's where I started to get that itch. And I just wanted to come in, learn more. It was always like going to Disney World, and so every time you would leave, you always wanted to go back. And with that, there was that time where I started to work with, a few different partners that really excited to be partnered with today. But there was an opportunity for me to jump in feet first and take a big risk and get into the venture ecosystem. But I spent a lot of months debating whether or not I should do this. And it was, there were a lot of factors. It was like, what's the worst that can happen? I was for it better start now, because if I want to start in 10 years, can't do it, right? It just gets harder and harder. So I met a gentleman who's actually on this call by the name of Wolf Starr. If you don't know Wolf, I highly recommend reaching out to him. He's been an inspiration, I think, to all of us on this call. But Wolf was also at the time getting involved in the venture ecosystem, and he was very community focused, really just about building those ecosystems. And that's where I was actually falling short. I was really on the technology side. I was on the working with big businesses. And when we tried to pair those two together, it was complex, but simple as well. And it just became this unstoppable force. And we started to do so many other initiatives and events, and it just turned into a snowball effect. And partnering with Wolf and actually people on the call here was the best decision about getting started. And I should have done it 5 years sooner, but really excited that we're getting started now. When it comes to building community, there is a lot that we can learn from. I mean, we're a big advocate on not only diversity and inclusion, but I think of diversity, kind of the larger spectrum of that. When you look at diverse perspective, diverse empowered teams, diverse backgrounds, and that's really what makes up community, and helping each other explore opportunities. Never walk away from opportunities. Always explore them. Always test them. I'm a big advocate for hypothesis testing and mapping out assumptions and figuring out what has to happen for this to be viable before we pursue it and go all in and waste everyone's time. And so there's bringing people together, whether it's in a physical space or virtual space, really helps enable that. There's a lot more to it, but I don't want to take up the rest of the call just talking about that one topic. But yeah, those are my thoughts on inclusive community.
That's great. And I know you've contributed a lot to our own culture and community here in the Loud family, I would call it. And proud to be on the journey with you, brother.
Likewise. Absolutely.
So Danielle, you were telling me, I think you were telling me, you or Melissa, I'm mixing up some of these stories here. When you saw existing workspaces that felt like just spaces, and can you expand upon that? Like, tell me how you build community in space, right? In a space, because in the end, you do see a lot of money and effort and time, even from the corporate world, building amazing spaces, right? And we all know that's a start. Okay. Now, what are some of the some other things that you have learned or definitely feel like is crucial to the community that you've already built?
Mm-hmm. So in working from home for so long, I realized a couple of things, which is what led us to creating Haven the way that we did. And one of those things is that, the isolation seems sometimes freeing in the beginning. You feel excited to have time to yourself and set your own schedule, and you're not strapped to your laptop, 40 hours a week. Although I think some people realize that you end up being strapped to your laptop a lot more when you work from home. It really depends on the company and the job that you're doing. But I also realized that the isolation wasn't just impacting my own motivation to get my work done. My productivity over time was falling. But it was also noticeable when I looked at all of my peers from grad school and where they were going in their careers. It was noticeable that, my isolation was preventing me from growing and expanding into what I thought that I deserved and what I thought I could do in my career. And so those were also part of the reasons that I went looking for co-working spaces instead of and leaving the coffee shops and the library behind. I went to these spaces because they were advertising connection, they were advertising community. And then in my experience, at least here in Columbus, and I think people beyond Columbus will understand this as well, the co-working spaces were creating really cool, vibrant, industrial, cool spaces that photograph really well and feel really cool when you walk into them and you feel proud that you're working from there. But the community managers were tapped out. Their focus was entirely on sales and bringing you in, but not on connecting you to the right people, not on getting to know who you were. One of my experiences in a co-working space, I was there for months, and every single time I walked into that space, the person at the front desk did not know I was a member and had to ask who I was and show that I was show my membership badge every single time, which is very frustrating because you would think that the person who sees you the most would at least recognize your face when you walk in the building. Most receptionists at your corporate job will get to know who you are over time, but these people still weren't doing that. They didn't have the time. They're strapped doing other things. And if they didn't know who I was, then they certainly didn't know what I needed or what my business needed. They didn't know who to connect me to. I guarantee they didn't know 90% of the other members as well. And then you're just in a cool space. And I'm sorry, I could do that in a coffee shop. I thought my apartment was pretty freaking cool. I'm pretty good at design. I loved being there, but I needed out of my house for other reasons. It's not just for a cool space to be. So looking at it and flipping that on its head, when we started building Haven, we wanted people to feel like they belonged there from the moment they walked in the door. We wanted them to feel invited. We wanted them to feel welcome. And so part of that starts with design. We still wanted cool design, but it was from a warmer, more inviting perspective than just a cool industrial trendy look. If you're going to leave your couch at home, you want to know that where you're going means something to you. And so it started with the design, and then it expanded. Mel and I are not just business owners. We don't just, sit back and watch, things in the background. We're sitting at the front desk. We were having conversations with every single member. I can tell you what every single member in our community does. Often I can tell you what they're struggling with and who they need connected to for support personally and professionally. So it was coming at it from a different perspective, coming at it from the community first, and then building spaces that would allow people to connect and grow and feel comfortable enough to share what they're working on, comfortable enough to be vulnerable with us, because as a solopreneur, it's hard. You have a lot of things going on in your head that tell you that maybe you're not, why are you doing this? Maybe you're not good enough. You have a lot of doubts. And if you're in a space that makes you feel that way even more, you're not going to grow. You're not going to succeed the way that you probably can in an environment around people who really get that and are also being vulnerable to you to share, how this really looks and what life, what craziness is really involved in entrepreneurship.
That's awesome. I appreciate that thorough answer. Let me ask you this. Basically the sauce is the intention, having a community manager with the intention of making your members feel warm and welcome, being, listening to them, because everyday problem solving in the journey of your business. And let's say I'm a customer of yours and I walk in to work. And so if I can be optimized in any way from this community, this will be good for myself. That's why I'm a member. it's obviously probably fulfilling for you, not only just being the business owner, but also being an entrepreneur. And is that a decent summary at the moment?
I feel like you've summarized it. You've said it probably more clearly than I did, but yes, great summary.
No, that's just how I interpreted it. But because so going one step further, and maybe Melissa, you want to chime in as well, is I have a co-working space right now in another city. I'm listening to this conversation and I hear basically, hey, I need to invest in a community manager, or at least have that intention. Can you give me some specific examples, not necessarily that person, but a scenario where by you being at that desk or someone, kind of conversations that's perhaps steered this person or group of people in the right place or back in line, or something that if you can share a story or two, I think that would be really helpful for the value of not only knowing my name and making me feel comfortable, but this is actually a journey that we helped kind of stay on course.
I think a little bit of our secret sauce is just that Danielle and I have both been part of large teams, led large teams. We have a robust corporate background before being here. So it comes a little more naturally to us than your typical community manager. And the fact that we are not just a hired hand, we're actually the owner, it just allows us to look at it through a different lens. The fact that we're so open about our experiences with our members so that they understand we're going through some of the same things as they are, I think often leads them to just share with us. And so, for instance, I'm a big proponent of knowing your numbers. I personally am not scared of financial documents. I understand them. So often, on more than one occasion, people will bring them to me like, hey, can you explain this to me? And I'm so happy to do that because number one, they trust me. And number two, I'm able to make them feel more comfortable with something I feel so passionate that they understand. And then I could take it a step further. We have an amazing CPA who's a member here who, Danielle and I both have helped her with her business and we want to see her grow and thrive and we trust her. So we can now refer this person who might need help with their financials to a CPA that we value. It's just like the whole ecosystem just like works together. That's one example. Or often people are struggling to do their entire job and manage social media. I mean, that's huge. How are you supposed to get on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all of it, and do it all? Well, we have a number of marketing professionals here in our community. So as people are struggling with making their posts get more engagement or making ads work, we know what questions to ask to say, hey, we've got Carissa Richardson. She's an expert in digital ads. We've got Tanisha. She's excellent at email marketing. We know what questions to ask to get the conversations right. And we actually will send the email. Hey, Tanisha, I had this conversation with so-and-so today. She has a few questions about email marketing. Would you jump on the phone with her? And it's like, boom, not only did we just make a connection, we made a potential lead for Tanisha. We provided a solution for that member who's struggling. It's all just very much in the blood of this place that you're going to help one another. It's not always that you're selling, it's that you're willing to help one another. Hopefully those are some good examples, but
that's perfect. It actually reminds me, kind of being a connector in the space, of how you just described how you can really build community by actually connecting resources that are already there, which sounds so simple, but it doesn't happen. And it's literally how I talk about venture, being an entrepreneur and being in venture capital, which there's not enough entrepreneurs in venture capital because a lot of it is connecting and getting through obstacles together. And even as an investor, if you're an entrepreneur, you understand that, you empathize with that, and you move forward. You're mitigating your risk as an investor. That's a no-brainer if you just look at numbers. But it's literally connecting and saying, oh my gosh, you need this, this, and this. And so we do a lot of connecting within our portfolio companies, investors, community. So it just reminded me of that. I mean, it sounds so simple and there'd be a lot of problems solved if people really understood that.
Well, I mean, to even take it a step further, Danielle and I have had several conversations about if we ever were to take on investment, what would that look like? And I would never take investment from someone who wouldn't be as invested in sharing their intellectual capital with me as their money. Because why? Like,
totally.
It's really about like someone who's willing to roll up their sleeves and is as passionate about your business as you are.
Yeah. And I will say that you're absolutely right, but that's also, that's a really great scenario to be in where you can pick that investor. Unfortunately, there's a lot of entrepreneurs who need to go to the next level and they don't have a large option pool of investors. So it's just something that I wanted to make sure to bring up, but I think that's spot on. Investors should not just be investing their capital. It should be their time, their mindset, and definitely with alignment.
Another thing that I'd like to add to that as well. And so I think about, investors kind of harboring or enabling innovation. And so, a lot of my focus areas are always on innovation, but, makes me think about like being innovative by design. And from that standpoint, they need to, well, I'll start with this. I would say, I know every company in the world, whether they were a startup or corporate Fortune 500 company, whatever you see today, no innovation was ever planned or forced. It was always discovered. Everything that became innovative was a discovery at that point. And from there, because of that, there needs to actually be kind of that opportunity, that creating that culture of innovation, creating a culture of exploration and this is where community comes in, and co-working and physical spaces can really help enable that. But it's creating a culture of exploration, giving autonomy to exploit different problems in different areas, and then being able to get the education that you need, whether it's just experience, but then it's also kind of a culture to embrace opportunities, regardless of how foolish they may sound. And, there's going to be an environment for testing, an environment for, like you mentioned before, yes, access to the resources that you need, whether it's marketing, legal, accounting, all that good stuff. But then there's also the opportunity to prototype, to do a lot of observation, interviewing, putting out business models and seeing what works. And if it doesn't work, move on and figure out what's next. And so a lot of the investors, I wouldn't say a lot, but I do know of some investors out there that don't embrace this idea, and then many who do, that really focus on doubling down and being okay with the failures. Failures is another big thing as well. I mean, we always learn about, failure is a lesson and we learn about it. But I actually believe in, if you want to build an innovation city, you want to build an environment of innovation, you need to set it up for failure. Now, I know that sounds extreme, so hear me out on that one. What I mean by failure is when you look at a massive ecosystem like Silicon Valley, for every $1 billion company that was created, there was trillions of dollars lost to getting to that point. And so what that, if you look at it on a bell curve, and unfortunately I can't draw it out for you, I'm the whiteboard person of our team here, but when you look at that, on one spectrum, you have these incredibly genius ideas, the innovative, the disruptors, and then you have on the end the foolish, ideas, the folly, the ones that have failed. They have to exist in the same spectrum together. So there has to be more failures. You have to look at your failures, and for every 100 failures, you'll run into 1 or 2 good ideas. And so the more opportunities that you can explore, the more opportunities that you can fail and learn from those failures, I think that's the critical component there, will allow you to grow and start creating these environments. And so having that opportunity to be able to set up a space, an ecosystem for that is basically that adding that to a secret sauce is, I think, a foolproof methodology.
That's interesting. And I agree with that. And you explain the why you need that. What's the how do you set up an ecosystem or community for failure? Just expectation and knowing that, or is there actually other things you would chime in on setting up for failure? Because that's
Yeah,
probably an important piece.
absolutely. So, with LoudX Venture Studio, we are always about creating the culture. We're more focused on culture than we are on, you know, architecture and what we're focusing on and pinpointing industries. It's really really around this mindset, but a lot of it is exploring ideas, right? So when there's an opportunity, we need to be able to set ourselves up to be able to explore ideas even further. Um, I'm a big advocate for running workshops and getting education as well. We've worked with different accelerators and different incubators and looked at different curriculums ranging anywhere from, Stanford grad school to Y Combinator to some organizations out in Europe of, what models fit. We know that there is no silver bullet for success. And so different methodologies like the lean startup methodology, design thinking, agile learning, all that good stuff. We give them the tools first to the education piece, education, leadership, being able to kind of run in this ever fast changing ecosystem, and then basically start exploring ideas from a curriculum approach, and that would be ideating many ideas running across the board. Then you need to validate those. Validating is very focused on workshopping. You're doing design sprints, you're doing strategy sprints, strategy workshops that are really these compressed weeks of basically you're taking months of work and you're compressing it, you're simplifying it. You're simplifying some of the most complex problems and you put them all down and then you just start to explore. You start to prototype. You're doing a lot of interviewing and observing people. You're doing user testing, getting some user validation. And it's more than just a interview and let's sit down and say, hey, what do you think of my new app that I created? Or what do you think of this new business that I'm going to start? It's actually going and putting it to the test, launching landing pages and seeing what kind of traction you get, and then pivoting as you need to do so. So that's just a small example. Again, I could take up the whole time just talking about how we do things, but I think it's that opportunity of really testing with intention. You can just say, yeah, we're testing it, opportunities to explore and just set up the ecosystem and see what happens. But you need to intentionally focus on the innovations and intentionally test it, intentionally put it to the, I guess you get my analogy, what I'm going
Yeah.
by, but yeah.
No, that's great. And I'll tell you, there's an overarching theme here.
Mhm.
It's not a physical place or an item. It's the intention and the culture and community within that. And so if I wish you told me this 6 years ago, because when I co-founded Loud, I did not know that. I did not know that I was going to fail a lot. But it was, so I should have expected it. But also that is a healthy part of, hey, you're trying a lot of different things. Try to fail fast, try to fail forward, keep going. But this is what's going to happen. No one ever told me that. And so now in 2021, I can say I failed a lot. We're still going. And this is great that this is an embraced thought and idea and strategy. So anyone listening out there will be watching this. Failure should be a part of your culture, but there's techniques and strategies and mindsets to navigate that. So when your failures do happen, it's not cry or you can cry, you can vomit, you can do all that. Actually, it's not really, that's normal, but just to move forward and don't feel bad about yourself. Feel good that you actually tried something that had the chance to fail.
Yeah, and we to that, you're right about that, spot on the mindset. We've worked with a lot of different startups. You and I, Navin, have seen these just firsthand in meetings, and I'm sure Danielle and Mel, you've dealt with this too. you can always pinpoint the first time founders. You can always find out who's the first time founder and what they're looking to do. I think when I look at companies, I want to look at their failures, right? I want to see how many times they've been through this mix. And, you'll have some people out west that'll argue, well, their number of failures is an indicator of, that they're bound to fail again. I think that's wrong. I think there's a little bit of a science to that, that can make that a little bit better of a thought process. But with all of that being said, it's when you learn from those failures, you get a little bit more resilient. You learn something different. You're trying something different, and you get to understand a little bit better. So you really can't grow without your failures, but you have to learn from your successes too. I also pinpoint Steve Jobs had a really, really good commencement speech. It was one of his last ones before he passed, unfortunately, at Stanford. And he mentioned that in order to look to the future, you need to connect the dots of the past. In order to look at the successes of the past, that helps shape up of what to do, what works. And so another thing at LoudX, when it's building this culture of innovation and this community of innovation, we're also testing tried and true methodologies, things that have actually worked. We're all about exploring new business models, new methodologies, but with the same mindset of how did it work in the past and can we make it work again here in a different way?
I agree. And I've watched that Steve Jobs commencement speech a lot. And I was on a Clubhouse panel a few weeks ago, and someone said they watch it every morning.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, we all want some energy and inspiration, and perhaps that's one way to go. But I watched it like right when I got off the panel, I watched it again. And I was like, yes. Meditation, yeah. Steve Jobs, get on with your day. That's not bad.
And maybe I stop by the receptionist desk for a pep talk from Danielle and Mel.
Oh.
Yes.
Actually, right here. That's awesome. Anything from Melissa and Danielle that you want to chime in on what he said about everything? He said a lot of things, a lot of good stuff.
There's
a lot
so
of,
much.
Yeah.
A lot of head nods. One of the best things that evolved out of Corona was that we had to pivot and create this way to support our community when they weren't here physically. And so we were quick to put our heads together and create content that we felt would support them, put together masterminds and one-on-one coaching and everything we could do to make sure they didn't forget that despite everything going on in the world, like you still have a support system. And Danielle, you might have a different point of view, but in most of my conversations with the, founders, small business owners, everything here is just reminding them that perfection is an illusion and that just trying something is a step in the right direction. Whether you fail or you win, you're learning. Mm-hmm. And so it really is like a micro example of everything you're saying, Sasha. It's just continuing momentum. And the thing that I'm constantly reminding business owners of, it's not about them. It's mm-hmm. not about them. Mm-hmm. They take it so personal. They want to put themselves out there or try the new thing because it's about, oh, what if people reject it? It's not about you. It's about what you are doing for others. So you're either going to learn what your customers want or you're going to learn what they don't want.
Yep.
In any event, if you approach it with service in mind and the fact that it's not about you, it's about them, you really cannot fail. It's just mm-hmm. like, we say it in a ton of different ways, but that is just the thing that comes up over and over and over when people are hesitant. And I dig deep into why. It's because they're making it about them. And so, it pairs nicely with this whole voice of customer and all this innovation, methodology, but it's just a much simpler way of saying like, customer's king.
Yeah.
Learn what they want.
That's a really good point. And it makes me think of something that you just mentioned when you talked about, what if they don't like it, right? What if we get rejected and whatever? You want that, right? You better do it now than you spending 10 years on this and seeing more rejection later, and all the dollars that you spent, all the time you spent on it before pivoting. And so, you know, there is that framework of like consensus ideas and non-consensus ideas. You want to be, I mean, it depends on your personality on where you actually want to be, but there's a benefit of having consensus ideas and not. If it's a non-consensus idea, it helps you understand whether or not this is time to move on or double down or whatever. Obviously, hopefully doing it with logic and kind of like an educational framework. But then also the consensus ideas, if it's being accepted and validated and it's gaining traction, those are the things you want. And yeah, I mean, it's always just putting it to the test. Again, it goes back. I think my theme for this conversation is testing.
And Melissa, and Melissa, you said that, you know, don't be a perfectionist, right? And try to, I'll tell you right now, that is really pertinent for people to hear continuously. You know, my background being an anesthesiologist, I worked and studied a lot of years to become a specialist, probably as close to a perfectionist in that realm as you can be, and to get my mindset to start unlearning that in the sense of becoming uncomfortable and being in the gray is obviously not for everybody, but there are steps you can take to realize that, because all you know, and as we get older, we're you know, the whole specialist realm, right? I'm reading that book Range right now, which is amazing, and just talks about the generalist versus specialists. And it's I texted Sasha, you know, about it. It's saying this book is amazing, and it's just saying that we as society have pushed a lot of our kids into being a specialist, because you're going to be the best at this niche, and that's the best thing. But really, there's a lot of data to really show that that's not really how it works. Now, you need specialists, you need generalists. Not everyone needs to just flip into one or the other. But it's just an interesting discussion when you said the perfectionist thing. To entrepreneurship is everything but being a perfectionist. It's literally every single thing except being a perfectionist. And
because you're wearing so many hats, how can you? Like, how can you be perfect at all of them?
Exactly.
I agree.
We
But
always say pick one. We always say pick one. Can you pick your high quality output? Focus on that. If it matters to you enough, you're going to carve out time every day, every week to work on it and build that skill. But you can't do it all. Just pick one to be really, really great at. If you need, you know, and generally we refer to that as our high quality output.
Yeah. That's
Absolutely.
awesome. Yeah. I just, people just need to know that, because there's so many specialized perfectionists who do not take opportunities on their table or do not even entertain another silo or pathway because they just know this space so well. So what do you tell those people? What do you tell the people that, hey, I'm just so good in niche and employed right now, and I have this amazing thing. I don't even want to consider that because I don't know enough about it. What do you say to those people?
I think
Side hustle time. Just dabble.
Dabble.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it kind of comes down to, you know, what is their intention of that thought process, right? Is it are they using that as an excuse to walk away and to not do it? Then, you know, that's something where, you know, if that's the case, they're going to be comfortable in what works. You know, you can always have them, you know, like Mel said, you dabble and you could test it out a little bit, you know, play and see what works. I do believe that, and I think I've said this to all three of you probably 20 times now, but you know, I think of leaders, and so leadership is another one of my areas. You know, I didn't pick one, I picked two. It was innovation and leadership, and specifically on the leadership side, you know that it is not the leader's job to know everything and to know what to do. It's their job to discover or actually create a system, design a system to help them discover as an organization that direction, to discover their strategy, to discover that one thing or those two things that that actually lead them to growth. And so if they're saying that, it's, well, you don't have to be an expert in that other area. You don't have to move forward. You don't have to think of, you don't have to jump into, if you want to build an app, you don't need to go and take all these classes on coding and everything and try to focus on that. Focus on what you're good at, and allow systems to help discover that. Bring in diverse, empowered teams. Bring in people to help us lead, to lead us to that direction. Then you'll surprise yourself with all those other areas that you didn't know about or you don't want to know about, but you don't have to be an expert in those other areas.
Being comfortable not knowing a lot.
Mm-hmm.
How's that?
Yeah.
Right. And once again, with my background, that was really tough to admit. I could walk in the hospital and I'm the physician in the room that supposedly knows a lot about a lot in this realm. And then now I walk into a room and I definitely am probably the least intelligent and smartest person in the room, which is a successful leader, right? We see those quotes, but I literally walk in knowing that I don't know a lot, but that's why I've surrounded myself with awesome team members that know a lot. And it's really just accepting that. It's getting over ego. It's getting over all this stuff that I've been growing in confidence, all my life. And in here, it's time to let go. That's really, really tough, but it is something that is probably one of the best things I've ever done personally. And more people need to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question for all of you. This talk about, right, starting businesses, but also with leadership and innovation. I feel like a lot of it has to do with navigating and making sense of ambiguity. Like on leading teams, right? Like there's a lot that you don't know. Innovating, creating new things in new spaces. There's a lot that you're talking to this before, Navin, about just like not knowing everything, and obviously all of you have had a lot of success in kind of getting past that. So I guess the question is, how do you navigate ambiguity?
I think the word leadership should just be replaced with clarity. Your only job as a leader is to provide clarity for your team. And even if you don't know all the answers, like just defining it. So like, again, what is the next small step that we need to take as a team? Is that next small step figuring out what our 6-month plan is? Maybe that's it. But it's like, how do you eliminate all the chaos and get it down to a clear, definable goal with a deadline that you can measure and everybody working toward that? Like, it's just that clarity. Like, that eliminates ambiguity. That eliminates all the different, things that can distract you. It's like, no, we're all working toward just getting here. So I just try and focus on like, what is the next logical, clear, defined, measurable thing we can work on as a team? I don't know all the answers and how we're going to get there, but that's the goal.
And I would add to that. Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I think internally with leadership, clarity makes total sense. But I would say for people who aren't, don't know a lot about, let's say, the business world or considering an entrepreneurial journey, ambiguity is always there externally ahead of us. So when you look at Danielle and Melissa and you say, wow, they've created Haven and it's only been since 2017 and they look like great leaders and they know what they're doing. But Melissa and Danielle, it's important for people to know that there's so much ahead of you that you have no idea. And you just have to be comfortable. And I say that because our role models or our peers, they don't have more clarity than a person sitting thinking about this. And I think that's what really surprised me, that we're in this business and there's a lot down the road that I don't know, but I'm comfortable with that now. I would say, to my 10 myself 10 years ago, hey, make sure you know that these aren't all people who have this crystal clear, I need to know this. And that also is another maybe obstacle of why folks don't move forward on things, because of ambiguity is always there.
Mm-hmm. You might not know what's coming 10 years, but like you can't control what happens in the next 10 minutes, 10 hours, 10, 10 days. Yeah.
I don't know what's happening after this show. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. To add to that as well, Kai, I know, and we've had some conversations before as well on a few different things, but I think of like the whole, I'm sure you've heard this before, the only thing certain is uncertainty. And, there's a lot of ways, like when you talk about how do we navigate through that, and not to do, I guess this is a shameless plug on, I'm a major advocate on workshopping and running workshops to help simplify complex problems. In the 10 years that I was in the corporate world, we, which is really not a long time comparatively. So I don't want people to get too excited when they hear, oh, 10 years he's been around. But most of the time I've seen, what I see there is the same thing that I see in the startup space too. So it happens quite a bit on both ends, is a lot of leaders, and when I think of a leader, I think of everybody in the organization, right? They have to be a leader in their own domain and what they're working on. And basically, like a lot of time is spent. I think the statistic was like 80 to 90% of work is actually busy work, and it's spent on busy work. And oftentimes you have this pressure to be innovative, to lead, to manage those uncertainties and not know where to start. And from that end, when we came in and I introduced workshopping to the team, to Navin and Wolf, who was on here earlier, and just everyone on the call, we started with design sprints. We started with just making simple decisions. And so there was a lot of, we actually got in a room, we had Post-its, we had all over the wall at the Loud office. And basically we were really just trying to solve a big problem, but we went to the root of the problem first. And we looked for that complexity. And so we looked for that simplification. And then we worked backwards and we reverse engineered that. One area that we didn't get to in that workshop, but what I always do as well, is there's always going to be a lot of disagreement within your organization of whether or not something is going to happen. It's, there's going to say, no, I don't agree with you. This isn't going to work. Or no, the statistics are different, or no, this is just a waste of time, or whatever. That can turn into circular discussions. And what happens with workshopping is it helps you lay out, and before you figure out what is going to happen next in an ambiguous situation, you have to plan out what has to happen in order for your assumptions to be validated or your assumptions to be true. And when you start thinking about what has to happen, you start working backwards from there, and you're thinking, then it actually starts to be more realistic, and it starts to be less ambiguous, because you're going to say that, well, that one thing that has to happen, probably not going to happen. This one's easy, it already happened, so we're good. And then, you just start working and you're graphing it out. It's almost a massive tree at that point. But, it's actually, that's kind of the step-by-step approach on how we address ambiguous situations and help lead us to that next step and that next goal.
Yeah, and I will say that particular workshop, and I'm assuming that's how a lot of the workshops will be. It was awesome for, as one of the drivers of the ships in the Loud organization, to have an environment where even the younger associates where we were solving a problem together. It wasn't, I'm not going to talk about this because I feel like this is an attack on leadership or attack on what's missing. And I've been, kicked in the gut enough times to know that I'm far from perfect. So I'm opening up and saying, I know there's things to fix here. And you created a culture or an environment to solve that problem without any hesitation from anybody. And to me, that was one of the, outside of solving the problem, which we did, which really was helpful. It was so valuable to feel that way and see that way, that even though I think our culture is open and welcoming, this was literally taking all that out and just saying, let's solve a problem on the board. That to me is so valuable. That's literally why we're going to be workshopping very often on specific things that I know about, and probably things that I definitely don't know about. Right. So it was just eye opening to be in that workshop. And I know that was just a very quick few hour workshop, but it was game changing. We had people fly in from out of town and everyone was like, wow. So that was awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, and I guess the last thing I'll say, I don't know how we're doing on time, but you know, that's exactly the other that problem solving technique with workshopping, is it gives everybody in the architecture, regardless of where they are, an equal voice. And a lot of the times, you're right, there are people who are reprimanded for failures, and they or for bad ideas, or they feel like they might say something that people don't like. And so I guess, you know, the last thing is, like, with workshopping, it is, I guess, full circle right here. We are creating that culture and creating that community of innovation.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think we just have a few minutes left. I don't know, Danielle, Melissa, do you want to say any last closing words, or even you can plug Haven, just sell, do, you know, whatever you want.
This is great. And I just wanted to, I know that Sasha has a lot more experience. It sounds like talking with teams, and Mel and I right now are dealing mostly with solopreneurs. So it might look a little bit different when they're handling ambiguity and trying to make decisions. And so part of what we've tried to do within the community is create stronger bonds through our programming. So we help them create that team, even though they're not necessarily employed by the same people, through our peer group masterminds, where we bring 8 entrepreneurs together once a month to talk through those struggles and really help them figure out what they can do to solve for some of that ambiguity and how to make those decisions together. And then, you know, we also work one-on-one with our members through business and marketing coaching to help with that ambiguity as well. So we're workshopping it, but not necessarily under the same, you know, team. We're a team in a different way. And that's something that I think a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with, you know, when they're just getting started and it is just them and they have only themselves to rely on and listen to. And when you're in your head a lot, sometimes you need those other voices, just like you've been talking about. And the way to get that sometimes is through a community of like-minded individuals. So we've really tried to create programming that helps them do what you're doing with larger teams.
We're launching our next round of masterminds on July 1st. So
and there's the
reach out if that sounds like your jam.
That sounds like my jam.
Come on, we'd love to have you.
I'm in. I didn't even know that. I'm glad you plugged that in, because I didn't even know. I'm in.
Yeah, we do it for 6 months at a time, and then we like scramble people up so you have opportunity to meet all different people. But we're doing our next launch in July, and it's got a bunch of really cool people in the mix.
I'm in. I'm in.
Cool.
Well, obviously, thank you so much to Danielle, Melissa, Sasha, and the folks who joined us live today. This will obviously is recorded, so others will be able to watch the discussion and perhaps give some input. But I really appreciate this conversation, really appreciate what you're doing for your own community, which, you know, one of my goals is to amplify those voices and intention so it affects community on a larger scale, because you can't be there at the desk for every single person in the world, but your ideas and your energy and your strategies for other entrepreneurs may be helpful. And same with Sasha. I mean, you can't be everywhere, but the more we talk about it and educate people and excite people, which is, I feel like, my full-time job. I've been called a cheerleader in the last couple of weeks, and okay, I'll take it. So thank you very much, everyone. And look forward to doing more conversations here in the future.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.